Welcome to the Reinventing Education podcast, a podcast for teachers, parents, and students who are interested in, well, reinventing education. I'm Rob McLeod. Silke Weiss, an innovative educator from Germany. Her work with Lernkulturzeit and Schulkulturzeit develops and provides seminars, retreats, and webinars. These help bring forth the kinds of teachers and people who will help evolve education. We discuss the importance of authentic relating in schools, how we spend our lives in school, and teaching as a life path. We are joined by Silke Weiss this morning. Silke, you and I, we've had the chance to meet a few times in person. And after every encounter we've had, I've always told Brendan afterwards, man, I can't wait to connect the two of you, because Silke's out there doing incredible work, pioneering very interesting stuff within the integral education world, and incredibly fostering all of this within the German language. I just think it's incredible what you're doing. So thank you so much for joining us.
My pleasure.
I don't know where to start because there are so many things that you're involved in. Lernkulturzeit being the main umbrella. Perhaps you could translate the word for us and give us a sense of some of the work that you do.
Lernkulturzeit. Learning culture time. Yes, it's a combination of learning culture. So in what culture do we want to learn and teach in the future? And time, really take time to think about it, to reflect about it, and have time also for this transformational change. Because if we want to go in a different culture, I always explain it with the 4 quadrants, because you have like outer change and inner change and personal change and more collective change processes. So if you really want to build a new culture, we can't do it alone. But it starts with everybody changing himself or herself to different values, to different attitudes, how we see ourselves as teachers and what we are doing in schools. And all these change processes take time. So starting with being a teacher and then being a trainer for teachers, I quickly noticed that all the programs that are set up for teachers, like training programs, they just start, they bring skills to people, and then everybody think now it's done, but that's not the truth. So we can teach new methods or new skills, but this personal process of really having transformation from inside, it takes a lot of time. And so we create spaces in our trainings that people can come together and talk about their attitudes, going into deep reflection, learning about new models and theories who explain what we are doing in schools. Why is it exactly in this way we have it now, and why can't we change at the moment, and what are the ways we can approach the change. So, and especially I think we create spaces for people to go in this transformational process.
I'm assuming you're working with people or schools who are actually wanting a change, but maybe are unable to articulate it exactly. Can you let us in on what some of your work looks like when you're working with groups?
Well, when I work with Lernkulturzeit groups, these are people who already have gone some steps into a transformational process. And they come because they want to come. And this is quite an easy work because people are prepared and they're really open for change and for new information and for new attitudes. And at the same time, I'm working in the system, in the school system, and sometimes I'm called for guiding a process in school development, and then not everybody wants to change. So I'm also dealing with a lot of resistance, and sometimes teachers are special clients because they know everything and they know it better. And especially in the system in Germany, teachers can't be fired, so they are employed for a lifetime. So if they don't want to change, so you can't do nothing. You can't say, okay, please leave school because we want to do something else here. And but my impression in the moment is that people are more and more open for change because they realize that society has changed a lot, and so their pupils do. And they can't go back. Some are still saying, oh, I want it like it was like 10 years before. I want my pupils back. I want my circumstances back. But this is impossible. We have so many themes at the moment in school development, like how do we integrate the people that come from different countries? How can we deal with the diversity in classroom? How can we deal with the fact that most schools are now for the whole day? So schools become more and more not only learning spaces but living spaces. And so we have to think about what is being a teacher. It's not from 8 to 12. So perhaps you have to be there for the whole day. So, and this makes a lot of resistance in people. And also with all the social problems that come into schools, we have to collaborate more between different professions. So we have not only teachers, we have social workers, we have special teachers for disabled children, because we have them in the school now in like inclusive lessons, in inclusive groups. And these are new demands for teachers, and really big challenges for the whole school organization. And more the school leaders and teachers realize that we can't go on with the old structures. We have to like reinvent the whole thing. We have to reinvent our roles. We have to reinvent how do we think about schools. And if you then bring some inspirations, like, oh, look at this school, they have changed it, and it's really a story of success. They begin to dream again. Maybe there's a chance that school could be totally different, where people can relax when they come into this building, where they learn a lot and are not stressed. And this is also something I really like to do, to bring like inspiration and hope that it is possible to change. And perhaps maybe it's at the beginning a bit more work, but at the end, everybody has a profit out of it. And so we are organizing a lot of network conferences and spaces that people can exchange their experience when they go on new ways. Because it's difficult. If you go a new way that nobody has gone before, there is no guarantee that at the end you will succeed. So there is a like you go into the jungle where nobody else has gone before. You have this big knife. I don't know how to say it in English. Machete.
A machete.
Machete. So and the pioneers go first with a machete, and then some others follow, and more the path gets bigger, and some years later, perhaps there is a big road that everybody can go. But if you go the first steps, it feels a bit scary.
Yeah. Do you think the pressure for these teachers and organizations is inevitable, or do you sense that they can feel it's inevitable while some are trying to go back to what worked in the past? What forces do you see in action that end up compelling this change?
It depends. The schools who are dealing with the most difficult pupils are more open to change because they can't do it in the old structures. One conservative structure is the German gymnasium, and there you can find more conservative ways of teaching and not really openness for change. It's more difficult to do it there.
And some of our listeners might be unfamiliar with the German gymnasium system.
The German gymnasium is where people go from 10 to the final exam, Abitur. How is the word in English for Abitur?
Yeah, I'd say there's no direct translation, at least to my experience in the North American system, but it's kind of like the proof or the final exam to prove that you have completed high school and are ready to move on to the next stage of school.
Yeah, I'm just going to jump in there because it's the closest analogy to the British A-level system. At 18, we take 4 or 5 subjects that then would be used in many cases to move on to university. It's similar to that A-level system in Britain.
Okay.
Yeah, and just a little bit more context historically. So my understanding was it's traditionally the gymnasium is where the best and the brightest would go, like the top 2% of the class, the enrichment students. And over time, that seems to have shifted, that more and more students have been able to gain access within the gymnasiums. But even still to this day, they're typically seen as a much more conservative approach to education, very much sink or swim. There's not a lot of support offered from the teachers, and it's kind of up to the individual student to prove that without this support and the high expectations put on them, that either they sink or swim, they really need to prove themselves in order to pass this. Is that accurate?
Yes. Yes. And it's also like the preference for the academic way. So that's still the belief that if you have a good final exam and then you go to university and study, and that's the perfect way to have a successful life. But this is old-fashioned, so it's not longer true. Not everybody who's going to university has a good job at the end, and this was like a bit a wrong development in the last decades. So we have to think about it again, because not for everybody the academic way is the right path. And so we have a lot of not really prepared students for university. The universities are claiming people are not really prepared. For some people, it would be more adequate to take like a professional career. but this has a bad reputation still in Germany. I have the impression that it's a bit changing now. So young men building a house with no t-shirt on, brown bodies, it becomes a bit sexy. So people
are warming up to the idea. Well, even in my own family, both of my brothers are essentially carpenters, and probably for the rest of our lives, the two of them are going to earn like double the money that I do as a teacher. So these are no longer low-paid jobs. These are actually very well-paid professions.
Also here in Germany, you never find a good carpenter, and they are always booked, and they gain a lot of money. So,
and school change is challenging because the schools change in order to meet the world around them, and the world is changing so dramatically right now. And school needs to be able to kind of figure out what is needed in the environment, and that's a difficult task to do in real time. Now, years ago, I imagine the gymnasium type process we were describing was a good fit for that kind of society at the time, and we're sort of making the case, and I know it's a big discussion in Germany, that perhaps it needs to be updated somewhat to better meet the needs in 2018. Do you see some common themes that go across all kinds of schools, common themes that schools need to address in their cultures, their systems, or practices to better meet the world as it is in 2018?
When I talk about the school of the future, I mostly start with welcome in the VUCA world.
VUCA being the volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity.
Yes. And most people never heard about it. And then I talk about disruptive changes that we had in the last decades and that we will have in the future. And I give some examples. And then often I notice that people never have never thought about it. How will the environment change for our pupils? So people who start, or children who start now going to school and leave it after 10 or 13 years, they will live in a total different world. And so we can't know what they will need then, what is the best. And so we have to do one thing, have really a closer look. What is their potential? What are their competences? What is it they are really good in and they are really strong? And have more a look to the potential and not to the weaknesses. So this is a totally change of the paradigm. But I noticed that there is a lack of information. If you are in school and if you are fully working as a teacher, as you certainly know, you have a lot to do. So there's a lot of work. And then you have also the community in your school, you have social relation and your social life in school, you have your relationships. So this takes a lot of time, and then there's not so much capacity to think about future circumstances. And I think there's a lack of information, and it's a bit difficult. If you give too much information, people start to be really uncertain and start to fear, to become fear, to have fear, and start to deny it. It's too much. So you have to find the right dose of information, and also not to let them go into a really deep hole but give them examples how they can deal with it. This is that in the last decades, I think they were like a bit frustrated about so many requests from the system. Do this, do that. Now we have this project and this project. Now it's developing in this direction, and the next year now the other direction. And they're a bit frustrated and not so open for more changes.
Mhm.
So the first thing is to activate, like to give them a glimpse of what is possible in their own environment for having some change, for being active and taking some responsibility for their environment, and do small things.
Well, it's funny that you're saying small things here, because I think a lot of teachers have gotten disenfranchised with the idea of changes in schools because there is always this new thing. There's a new project, and 2 years later, we're not doing it. We're on to the next thing. We're on to the new thing. And these are changes, but they're surface level changes. And the system that remains underneath it is still the same. We're just changing the deck chairs on the Titanic, as some people say. But what I think I hear you talking about is addressing that core foundation of what we are as schools. And how do we throw out what we've been doing and start fresh? From our own discussions, I mean, the feedback loop between school and society reinforce one another. And I can't remember which website of yours it came from, but you had said that schools and colleges are like acupuncture points for social change. So is it right or fair to say that like you're trying to support a different kind of citizenship, society, and sense of self that's maybe not common yet within the way we're living?
You can't separate this. So if you get some for example, if I work with the school and I put some information and give them like a perspective, where do we go in the future, and how can we prepare our children in the best way to deal with it? It's like, and then we work with them to activate their deepest values again, and why they are teachers and what they really want to do. And from this point, think about the structures. If it is really necessary, do it like in this or in that way, and what can we change? And this is, I think, sometimes I go out from a day when I work with schools, and I have the feeling, okay, this was the start of a transformational journey. And not everybody has to get it immediately. So it's like you drop it in, and then it will work. It will take time. So discussion will start, and some people get it and they go in different ways, and you support them, and others see, oh, it's working, and they follow them. So, and you can't separate this from when we really think about how do we teach, what is our role, what are our attitudes, what are our values, and really come to the point what is necessary to support people for the future, for their pupils for the future. Then the behavior will change, and this will have consequences to the organization. There will be different structure also in the schedule of schools, and but mainly the the attitudes and the relationship between teachers and students will change. So they will be more on a equal level and respect more the children and in their rights, in their needs, in their competences. And this will lead to a different citizen, of course.
And starting with the teachers, I mean, like there's so much PD, so much professional development out there and available to us. Like we're swimming in it. The thing I pick up on from your work, though, is you can't just train the person as a teacher. It sounds like you're wanting to meet that person and develop them as a person. You must introduce practices, further teaching along the way with practices to develop as a person. Can you give us some examples from your work of how you go about this?
Well, I think there is perhaps we can sum up in some headlines. We are dealing with education and consciousness. So become conscious of what you are doing and then have the possibility to change. And we train skills how to become more conscious. So how to hear your inner voice again and find back your come back to your intuition and your deep feeling for what is right or wrong, and also to see how do you react to certain situations and what has it to do with your personal story. So like we do a lot of shadow work with people, and we see it like being a teacher is like going on a certain path. So sometimes I call it the teacher's path. It's your possibility to develop your highest human potential in a way. When you accept that working with people always has to do with working with yourself and become clearer and clearer. How do you react to people? Why? Why is it like this? And see it as a chance to grow in your personality and develop yourself. And so we do it for example, in a 1-year training, and at the end you get it like a degree or a title of being Lernkulturzeit, learning culture coach. And it's not like coach you have sometimes the meaning in the football that you all just train some skills, but coach really in the original meaning of guiding a person to develop their own potential. So, and this has a lot to do with develop your own potential. So if I have made the experience of how does it feel like being in a group, being seen as who I am and what I really want to do in the world, and be supported and finding my inner truth, then I can open spaces for people I want to support in their highest potential. But it has a lot to do with first going the way for yourself. And I think personal development in a group, so that a group can reflect you to find your highest potential, is a very good way to do this. Because the group creates a strong field and a space of trust that you can just relax into it, and from this point open up and develop into your own highest potential.
Which sounds like a great antidote for the VUCA world of volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. It seems like in that kind of world, one of the most important skills to have would to be clear on your own path and your strengths and your abilities to face the VUCA world, what your strengths are, what you're going to do in this world, by being able to set your sights high and take on that responsibility to pursue it. Just seems like this is a beautiful thing for teachers to come more in contact with and have that trickle back to their students in the classroom?
At the moment, we are thinking about if it has to be the teacher, or if Lernkultur coach, the learning culture coach, is even a new profession in schools, so that you can go on this way as a teacher, but you don't have to. Perhaps we need a new profession that is not a social worker who deal with the problem, that is not the teacher who is dealing more perhaps with the content, but it's a person who is specialized and trained to guide people in their personal development. And not only the people, but maybe the whole community. How are we communicating with each other? Is our how is the atmosphere we are creating in our team? What values do we have? So we have, I think, if we go for a new profession in school, and I think this would help to change the system, if we have people in who are really conscious about these changing processes. So we can have two benefits. One is support people in their personal development, teachers or even pupils or even teachers, but also like have a look on the field we are creating together in schools as the colleagues, because one thing you said is important. If we go in a world who's so uncertain, you have to find your inner stability that guide you. But at the same time, these challenges for change, I think it's not possible that only one person can say, okay, let's do it like this. So we need the collective intelligence. We need the people like switched on with their personal intelligence and bring it together. And I sometimes compare it with the work in our brain. So we have brain cells, but one brain cell is not intelligent. The intelligence comes from the connection and from the exchange. So, and like the brain cells do it with like neurotransmitters and electric signals. We have to do it with relationship and communication. And so if the relations are not open and people don't communicate with each other, the system gets less intelligent and can't deal with the challenges. And so I think these two processes, one on the personal level and one on the collective level, and these are inner processes. I think this would be good to have like a profession in school, like this learning culture coach, who brings in new information and skills.
It seems obvious when you say that if we're going to reinvent education or upgrade education, we must then upgrade the people within it, how we interact with each other and who we are. We must upgrade to have new roles within schools that didn't previously exist. We can't just stick to what used to work and then pick and choose from within that. If we're going to reinvent or evolve or upgrade education, we need to upgrade and reinvent the systems, the structures, the ways that we interact with one another, our behaviors, our practices, and some of our beliefs about how we should be together with each other.
Yes, of course. It's absolutely necessary. And I think the need for change is more and more obvious. And so I'm looking forward to it.
Great. That's been really interesting to listen to. I have a few questions and themes. If it's good, if this is a good time for me to jump in.
Yes. You're welcome.
Yeah. Lots and lots of really inspiring ideas there. And I think the idea of intelligent systems is something that I've been trying to put my finger on for a little while. I haven't used that kind of terminology, but I've been talking around it. And I wanted to ask you, I guess, some questions related to this. I would say my first question is, having come from a German school that has a gymnasium, and I know you've already said that's kind of the most difficult, the most conservative place to begin this process. So maybe my question's a little bit tough, but how would you advise a school that is so heavily connected to tests and state curriculum and those pressures? How would you begin that process to move into making those kind of schools more developmentally minded?
I think every process that deals with inner development, you can't initiate it if people don't want it. So the first step has to be that they want some change, so that they are open. If they don't have a question, you can't teach the answers, so they won't hear it.
Mm.
And somehow I'm fine with it, because if we think about going to a new educational system, and we're talking about diversity and going for the potential development, so like a conservative school like gymnasium is one kind of school, and I think it will, some schools will stay like really conservative, and for some pupils that's the right place to be. So
Okay.
they are stable in their self, they want to learn a lot, they have a lot of possibilities, and they find really they find a lot of possibilities to develop their skills. And I think for some, I think we shouldn't go for, we have to change everything in the same way, because this is old-fashioned, that we do it, that everybody is doing the same. So when we allow people to go into more personal development and to accept diversity in school, we have to accept that also the people in school, the teachers, are very different, and also that different kind of schools are, that's okay. If you go to a gymnasium, you know what you have to expect, and if you go to a different school, it will be different. And so it will start with finding the right school for your development.
Yeah, I think that's a really clear answer for me, because it is about context, and the gymnasium is the right place for a lot of students.
Yes.
And I guess what you're saying of going into it knowing what the gymnasium offers and what kind of skills you will develop there. And I guess currently the system isn't really working in the way that a lot of people going into gymnasium are possibly actively choosing that path. It's more that they want maybe the end product of that path rather than the path itself.
Exactly.
And I think that's maybe some of the problems with the system as a whole. Yeah.
So it's more to support pupils who are not made for going this path, to be self-confident if they go another one. So, because still there's a bit like, oh, you have to go there. If not, you won't have success in life. So, and I think we have to work on this so that pupils see these different possibilities and support it to go their way.
That's an interesting take, because I guess in many of the other interviews, we've actually talked about the school itself needing to change and there being a kind of developmental school that is right for people rather than having potential different paths. But I'd kind of like to flip that and ask, if there were a truly developmental school, maybe you know of one already, but if there were one or is one, what would that look like? I understand that's a very big and vague picture, but what are some of the things I might see in that school on a day-to-day basis?
Mm-hmm. You will see a lot of ends. Not this or that, but and. For example, not only digital education or analog, but digital and traditional methods. You will see not only individual support, but or individual content, but also community, time for community. You have times for instruction and still like being the teacher in the first row and giving instructions, but also working in groups, working individual, having spaces for relaxing, lying down, take a nap, come to yourself, daydreaming, work with your hands, being creative. But also learning to do a presentation and a PowerPoint and going onto a theater stage. So you will have a diverse learning environment, and where people are more, they decide what they want to learn and when and with whom. And they have teachers as the guide by their side, not only the instructor, but also the instructor and the supporter or the mentor or the coach. And I know one school in Germany that I find a really good school for the title School of the Future. It's a really good model. Alemannenschule Wut-Oeschingen. Yeah, and I'm really excited. And they have a different. They had a process of really rethinking, reinventing schools, and find a new like pedagogy, and then decided to build a new school, but with the nucleus of their values. And then from there, building structures. And it looks totally different than any other school I know.
What are some of the things that maybe we can learn from this school or take from it into maybe our own schools or back into our own practice?
Collaboration on eye level. So this whole creation of the school was a good cooperation between the town, the mayor of the town, and also it's a lot of collaboration on eye level between teachers and students and parents. So this is really like a community that is working, and this we can learn when we think about building a new building, for example, a new structures in schools. So we have to have this exchange between the different groups in schools who have an interest in it. They have a lot of trust in their pupils. And at the same time, they have, as they are not really having like this 45 minutes lessons and a lot of instruction time, teachers have more time to be with their children individually, so to really support them in their personal process. And you have the concept of coaches, of mentors, and it's not such a big school. It's like a smaller system, so you know each other. So this is also a very important point, that I think that we have a lot of problems in bigger schools that we won't have in smaller schools, or even if we have more team structures into a big system, so that people know each other. This is so that they have really strong personal connections. This is one thing we can take out of it. And for example, when I think of the whole the building, they used a lot of delicate materials. So like very thin curtains, nice floors, and the surrounding is very beautiful. Every corner is really designed with a lot of love, and people worship it. So they come there, and the director said, as we are here the whole day, everybody should feel at least as comfortable as at home. Every person there has his own working space. So you can go there. It's a big space for 150 people, and they can work there individually on their own working space, and it's quiet. And they enjoy the silence, that they can concentrate. So in this school, I really find it, as the theory always say, children want to learn. We just have to let them do it. There you can find a really example for it.
It seems the through line in our discussion so far is this idea that we as agents can consciously choose the kind of life that we're wanting. And if we're already spending so much time of our lives in these school buildings as teachers, as students, as administrators, what kind of space do we want to be in? How do we want to feel? What kinds of relationships do we want? And then with that vision, work backwards to ensure that the places we're spending so much time in support that and nurture that.
Yeah, and you have to accept that being a teacher is not a job. That's a path. That's a life you choose.
Yeah, the word that's really important there is trust, because
yes,
this is something that keeps coming back up. The theme, again, of many of the discussions we've had on the podcast and the interviews is that, yeah, students want to learn, and students want to live happy and healthy lives because they're humans and we're all human. And this idea of trusting, how would you, if you went into a school and they had identified that they needed to make changes, but one of the issues you felt was trust within the group and within the pupils and teachers, would you have any strategies that you would introduce to help build that trust?
It's a lot about personal relationships and being vulnerable, being honest, starting authentic conversations, and being there as a whole being. So you don't go in and take off your personality like a coat and bring it to the wardrobe, and then being a teacher and after school you take your coat, your personality, you put it on and you go out. Yeah, why can't we tell each other what we are worrying about, what are our fears? Sometimes when I was a teacher in school, at the end I made a party to say a goodbye party, and I brought people together who are working there for more than 20 years together. And on this social event, I made some activities to connect a bit deeper. And they suddenly, one person said, "Oh, you are married? I never knew." Something like this. So the private person was totally out of the system. So it was just me, my role as a teacher, my function. And I think this we have to change. So if we connect on a personal level, when I know what are you burning for, what's really important for you, who are you as a person, this will lead to a more stable relationship and more trust. And so we can cultivate it in between the teachers, and this will have also consequences for how we deal with our pupils. If we have like this haven of when I'm with my colleagues, I'm safe, I'm supported, I have people who trust me, so I can trust my pupils also, my students. So I think this is kind of interdepending.
This seems like possibly the biggest change in the role of the teacher, the expectation that you would be honest and authentic in what you do. Because I think there's always been this element of trust in a teacher, but it's usually been one way. It's been the authority figure rather than an honest trust in them as a human being, rather than just as the role of teacher. So thanks for that, because I think that's kind of filled in a little bit of a gap in something I've been trying to put my finger on. But I think not underestimating that role of honesty and authenticity and trust in that relationship, all the relationships within the system.
Yes, and for example, if there is I recently was in a group with total different school leaders from different school. They have to bring on a big project here for the whole region. And I guided the first meeting. And what we were doing is like talking about our personal problems with this project. So it was a really open and really personal talk, and everybody was seen in what he's dealing about, and from this point on, we can now go into discussion about how we do this or that. But if we don't have this base, so that I have the feeling I'm seen, I'm right here, everybody accepts me, I can lower my fences and be more authentic, be more personal, and be more vulnerable. And I don't have to defend myself the whole time and going into discussion. And it's really important if I'm right or not. So, and this will, I think this will influence the whole process now.
Yeah, I think a lot of when those discussions happen in school, a lot of the fears are maybe there is an outside expectation that's forcing us to act a certain way. And I think this comes back to, you spoke about responsibility before, because there'll always be expectations, but it's how we deal with that responsibility.
Yes.
This idea of introducing authenticity to the system and seeing how it reacts to it, that just sounds like such a big piece of the puzzle that's missing right now. As teachers, there's so many different masks that we often wear as part of the job. And there's parts of ourselves we have to kind of compartmentalize or not give so much attention to, or perhaps expand parts of ourselves just to play the role. And a lot of that, I think, runs counter to maybe how we want to be as people.
Think about the amount of energy you have to invest to pretend to be someone instead of being yourself, with all your thoughts and all your with all your the things you are able to do or not able to do, with your fears, with your feelings, instead of pretending I'm the master of disaster, I can't do everything, I have no weaknesses, I'm strong. And this has to do a lot with trust, and it's people are not used to this in school. They used to have this kind of openness and relationship, perhaps in their private environment, in their families, but not in school. And we need this, and also pupils need this. They need the direct contact, not the contact with your role, but with you as a person. If they don't get it, they invent strategies like making you so angry that you are exploding, pushing all the buttons they find.
Of course, yeah.
They will find a way to get in contact. And then if you remember your own time in school, and you remember perhaps a teacher who was really honest or really himself, so you liked him or you not liked him, but you could connect. And these are, in my experience, the people we remember more than others that have been in their roles. Yes.
Yeah, remember the humans, not the automaton teacher. Yeah, it's tough though. It's tough for me. It's tough for me to be a human, but I try. I try my best.
Yeah, and this is a wonderful role model.
Well, this seems to be a recurring theme in ideas about how to further education. This idea that students pick up on how we're being, even more so than what we're doing. We're modeling so much about what a human being does to kids, being in contact with them.
In exact the phase of life where you find out who you are and what you want to do in your life. So if you work later on, perhaps with adults, this is a bit different. But this is a so delicate time, and they have so many questions and searching for role models. And if you are not there as a person, how could they connect?
That seems to me like a natural wrap-up spot. Brendan or Silke, anything further that you'd like to add?
Just my hope to find more and more people like you also, who are interested in transformative changes, and try their best to somehow bring it forward and spread the information like you do with your podcast and your activities. So thank you for that.
I really appreciate getting the chance to speak to you, Silke. really inspirational, and I'm very happy to have met you and heard your philosophies and and some practical advice there too. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
If this episode of Reinventing Education was insightful or useful to you, feel free to reach out and connect to us on social media. We'd enjoy having your perspective. Join the conversation about what reinventing education might look like. Feel free to find us on our Facebook page, Reinventing Education Podcast, and join the discussions there. From Brendan and myself, thanks for joining us.